Hello, good evening, and many thanks for joining us right here on Rwanda Television. The Commonwealth Heads of Government right here in Kigali has actually started and is ongoing with different events and actually related events ongoing. And the Commonwealth's 54 member countries have combined a population of 2.5 billion people, of which 60% are actually young people under the age of 30. So the Commonwealth sees young people between the ages of 15 and 29 as actually assets towards the organizations or even particularly countries' assets towards development. And the 26th Commonwealth Heads of Government that is here in Kigali is being held under the theme delivering a common future with connecting, innovating and transforming, and particularly the Commonwealth Youth Forum that is on the sideline of CHOGM 2022 is under the theme taking our future, how young people on the continent and actually beyond can embrace and actually take the lead towards the future. And this is what we are particularly going to be talking about in this particular show, as we will be discussing and debating, agreeing to agree on what are the challenges at hand for the African young people, and what actually are the opportunities as well as at hand, and what really needs to be done to address these challenges so that young people on the African continent can be the lead towards development and prosperity. So allow me to welcome my guests tonight. I'll be having Kevin Ekajirimundu. She's the CEO and co-founder of Zuri KNY, the eco-friendly footwear brand here in Rwanda. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
Kevin has also recently had her face shown at the New York Times Square after graduating from the NASDAQ Entrepreneur Center. And we will also have Sharonice Bush, who is the National Youth Council head for Namibia. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Good evening to the viewers. I'm excited to be here.
All right. And we'll later be joined by Mr. Kim Allen, who is the chairperson of the Commonwealth Youth Forum. And as I just said, we are going to be discussing around the opportunities and challenges that are still being faced by the by young people, be it here in Rwanda, on the African continent and beyond, with a focus on the Commonwealth. I'll start with you, Kevin. Opportunities versus challenges at hand for young people. What do you think, first of all?
I do think that it really goes around the basics and the fundamentals of how the youth views themselves in being partners and actually being able to help bigger institutions, the government. How can they be involved? Usually we are like, are we even, is it like, are we part of this problem? And we're not even sure if these challenges that are going around are actually affecting us. So young people needs to seek information of what's going on and how they can be involved. And then also, our elders need to also kind of give us more information on how can we be involved as well. So these challenges are existent and they're affecting young people. And so how can we actually be involved? Are we even part of these challenges? And the minute we know that, I think we start to find solutions.
All right. Sharonice, what do you think before we get onto particular challenges and opportunities that young people are still facing?
Thank you, Sam. I think firstly it's important to recognize that young people are confronted with challenges, and our challenges, whether we're in different countries, whether we're in different continents, are very, very similar in what we are facing as young people. And we know them because we are going through them as youth leaders. And to start off, we know that there is a crisis of youth unemployment, not only specific to Namibia, but on the continent and beyond. We know that we have an issue of education, young people falling out of the educational system and end up in the informal spaces. How do we harness the potential of our young people that does not make it through formal education. We know that we've got young entrepreneurs that are in the informal economy that struggle to move over to the formal economy. So we know what the issues are of young people, because that is why we're also youth leaders. The challenge, therefore, is now coming up with solutions, and that is why particularly this year, the theme of the Commonwealth Youth Forum really speaks to young people taking action. And that really, for me, is how we can elevate the conversation around what collective action do we take to solve the problems we are faced with.
You are talking about the young people not being given enough platform, if I heard you well. But even where they're given platform, do they really tap into it? As Kevin was saying that young people need to get the right information of what is at hand and get to tap into it. Are the young people even tapping into the existing opportunities and the platforms that are already there?
Sam, I would like to argue, yes, we are. Perhaps not to the extent that we should, but we are. And I can back this up by saying that you see right now, young people have realized the power of unity of purpose, the power of an organized space, where you have an organized voice, where the purpose comes out clearer. And you see on the continent that, especially in the Commonwealth as well, we have realized that when you realize the power of coming together and having a unified voice, you actually influence outcomes. And I speak for myself. In our country, for instance, our president has placed a premium on including young people in decision-making spaces. Right. You see this through his appointments. On the continent, Namibia was the first country to appoint a youth advisor that serves in the president's office to influence the youth voice at the highest level in our country. Our president also took a deliberative decision to appoint our youngest deputy minister on the continent, who is the Deputy Minister of Information, Communication and Technology. This emanates from the fact that young people are organized in amplifying their voices to say, we want a seat at the table. And we see that it's working when we speak in a unified voice. When we come together, when we organize ourselves better, we carry great influence and we influence outcomes that's to our favor. So I would like to argue that the young people in the Commonwealth, the young people on the continent are organized, but we can do so much more when we realize actually how much power our voices carry in influencing agendas that concern us.
All right, Kevin, we're talking about investing into the youth and actually empowering them. What and how much is really needed to invest into the youth, and actually what's the point of return?
I do think that how the opportunities can be given to young people is by really giving them information. I remember being at university as a young woman before I started my company. I was doing research around education and how many people, because I was in school at university and I was just challenged by the fact that there are few women at university. I was coming from a girls' school. And so getting access to information can take long. And so how can we actually get that information as soon as possible so that it can help us to actually take action sooner? Absolutely. Before we're labeled, we can't do anything. And I would actually love to argue that we have so much potential, but we haven't really fully utilized it. When you look at developed countries, some of the biggest companies are owned by the youngest generation.
All right.
And how can we actually use that information to get to that level? And last year, in terms of investments, Africa received, well, mainly the big four, Kenya, I think Egypt, South Africa, Nigeria received over $4 billion in investments. And investors were desperately looking, and they're still looking, where can we invest within Africa?
All right.
And then at the same time, you realize that actually young people are very scared and not confident enough to put themselves to the forefront of this movement in terms of business.
Why?
I would have to argue that there is less awareness on exactly on what Sharon was saying. We're powerful. We have so much potential. But I feel like there's somebody who needs to tell us sometimes. And young people will be surprised with how much their brain can actually achieve. And being young, someone actually asked me recently, what is the asset, what is the biggest asset you had when you were starting your company? I think being young, because I would hop on a motor and deliver. I would just walk in the rain and be okay. I would walk kilometers and be able to sweat and be still be
Kevin,
fine.
are you trying to say young people are really not aware of their potential?
Absolutely. I think we have way more potential than we like to say and we like to demonstrate.
Before I come to you, Sharonice, I would first like to welcome Kim Allen, who is the chairperson of the Commonwealth Youth Council. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
I will come back to you. You wanted to say something about
I wanted to add on to what my sister here mentioned. In as far as addressing the gap of information, for instance, in our country, we are trying to structure youth development. So for instance, the National Youth Council, of which I head as the executive chair, would then serve as the catalyst of government to bridge that gap, to ensure that one, young people are aware that there's an institution, an organized institution, that is their first entry point into ensuring that one, do we have the information? Can you facilitate agency for us? Can you facilitate mobility for us by either assisting us financially, technically, or otherwise? So I really believe that youth development must become formalized, institutionalized, and mainstreamed. There's a perception that sometimes youth development just rests with the youth ministry, and that is not the case. Like she has said, you've got young entrepreneurs that would want to know, how do I penetrate the African market or the global market? So we need to also understand that it's high time that we mainstream youth development so that all of us become champions of young people, whether we're in government, we're in private sector, or in the public space.
Kim, you are a representative of youth, if I could generally describe you in that way. But looking at youth development and having the youth to actually play a tangible role in the development, be it of themselves and our countries in general, we can say policies that are targeting the youth for their development are there. Perfect, actually. We can say documentations are already there, but getting on the ground to see the implementation of these policies and actually these agendas that really put the youth into action to actually take part into the implementation and the applicability of these policies is actually the main problem that is still limiting the youth anywhere, be it here in Africa and beyond. What's your take on this?
Thank you so much once again for having me, and thank you for this opportunity to engage and also share what CYC. So basically, Commonwealth Youth Council, of course, as you mentioned, targets young people as a bridge between young people and, of course, the stakeholders, the governments, and every stakeholder in countries across the Commonwealth.
All right.
On that note, every country has its own challenges. We have the challenges of policy implementation. So, of course, you mentioned their policy, but there's always gaps in every policy. And that is why we need young people. And as you mentioned, young people bridge that gap. And with Commonwealth Youth Council and every other youth organization or stakeholder, understanding the context of the country or the region in Africa gives us the insights to where those gaps are. And at the same time, what kind of resources that are needed, not only resources in terms of finance, but skill sets, and how this can be targeted to address those gaps. So that's number one. And the two is the partnership. So every organization out there, we have strengths and weaknesses. So those partnerships where we can see and identify, where we can bridge, see the gaps, and only then we can build our potential and invest in those areas. So in summary, I can say.
You just summarized it, but who is who to blame? Who is who to actually, who is not doing their role? Who is not playing their part so that we can achieve this in reality, not just in words?
Thank you. That's a very critical question. I can frankly say that there is no blame game in every issue because everyone needs to take responsibility. And as young people and as a representative of the youth, speaking on their behalf.
Yes, I believe everyone needs to take their responsibility, but we've been talking about this for the past 10 years, and if actually nothing changes, we are still going to talk about it even in the next 20, 50 years. But the action.
Thank you. So let me say that given, like, coming back to responsibility, like COVID-19 has showed us so much lesson to learn from. We see young people coming out creative, as you mentioned. We see young people coming out innovative, creating solutions, technology to connect young people to digital connection, divide, address those issues because of education was an issue because no more classrooms, no more students getting into classrooms. So digital divide created by young people address those solutions. Now coming back to those, as I mentioned earlier on, the challenges that in every context has its own challenges. Now, for the implementation part, I will be frank in saying this because we have a role to play. And what dialogues and meetings in these discussions is that we hope for the best, that every stakeholder, every player, the government or every youth stakeholder or partners can identify which areas that can be addressed. And we hope that young people, or they can work with young people. We hope for the best outcome, which is, as you mentioned, the implementation of these policies.
All right. Kevin, talking about opportunities, you said something interesting that the youth really needs to get the information on what is available and actually tap into it. But opportunities are there at some point. But do we say the policies or the governance or the head of these policies and opportunities are the ones to blame, or the youth are lazy at some point?
That's a very special question. I'm not going to go far away from what he mentioned, although I'm just, as an entrepreneur, I'm going to say that young people need to work a little bit smarter in terms of looking close on what the government is doing and what the policymakers are building today. Because recently we were in a meeting with the Ministry of Trade, and they were asking what else can we do, and we all debated that there are so many platforms created by RDB, created by so many organizations, and they're not even used. Why would we be creating others when we haven't used the ones that have been created ages ago? And so young people need to look closer, need to look a little bit harder, and also need to think beyond a closed box of, if I create something, let's say a camera, everybody's going to create the same thing. That's why we actually raised an issue of copyrights a few years ago, 2 years ago, I think.
All right.
And so what is it telling you if they create a copyright? That means you need to the market becomes a little bit harder. When you came into the market, there was no blueprints. So now there are blueprints. There are companies that have created amazing things locally. So, but they're not enough. They're not enough. So I'm really trying to criticize my own kind because that's where I am. It will be very difficult for me to criticize the government, although it will be, I have seen so much being done and we haven't utilized it at a maximum level. And so what are we doing to actually get these opportunities and use them?
Are you trying to blame young people for not tapping into the opportunities at hand?
I'm not going to say blame. I'm just going to say we can do better. We can do better than what we have been doing for the past, let's give an example of Made in Rwanda campaign that was created by the Ministry of Trade after seeing a little bit of potential. But what have we done for the past almost 10 years or more than that of creating that campaign?
All right.
What blueprints, what unicorns have we created? So there is so much more that can be done by young people to actually utilize the platforms that have been created by the policymakers, and I believe we can do much more. I believe we can create amazing unicorns out of Rwanda.
Sharonis, you just talked about some opportunities and what is being done in Namibia. Kevin talked about what is being done here in Rwanda, but looking at this in a broader sense, do you really agree with her that young people are being given enough opportunities and a platform to actually explore whatever they have?
Firstly, it is my view that we won't solve anything by trying to pin blame either on the young people or on the government. What I think we did learn as stakeholders or partners in development or as actors in development is that it's business unusual. COVID-19, the pandemic has taught us that if anything, we need to be creative. We need to do away with the conventional way of doing things. COVID-19 has really challenged us to become smart in the way we do things and in our approaches and in our work. And that is the same to the opportunities that young people are presented with. So really it is the challenge of us young people to demonstrate that we are innovative, right? That for me is extremely critical. There are opportunities for the young people.
Right.
What we need to do is we need to know how to leverage and optimize those opportunities. And that for me is extremely important. For instance, the Commonwealth has alliances and they've got networks that does work. They've got a network on entrepreneurship, they've got a network on climate change, they've got a network on gender, they've got a network in education. So how do we use these networks to our advantage as young people? How do we organize ourselves to know what are the opportunities that are there in the Commonwealth Entrepreneurship Network? How can we as young entrepreneurs optimize that opportunity?
Right.
So the opportunities are there, and that's undisputed. I think what we as young people need to do is realize that it's time for us to become a little bit more innovative in optimizing. And for instance, there's the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that is being discussed for us to do business on the continent. And that is in line with Agenda 2063, creating the Africa we want. As young people, do we know, have we defined our space in the conversation of the Continental Free Trade Agreement? Do we know how we want to be a part of realizing the Africa we want by Agenda 2063. So really the opportunities are there. The challenge and the burden, I think, is on us as young people to demonstrate that we're not the leaders of tomorrow, that we're the leaders of today, because we have demonstrated we've got the experience, we've got the competencies, we've got the know-how to solve our problems as young leaders, and that for me really speaks to the issue of inclusion. And so I think that young people do have opportunities.
And
Right.
can I add on what
Yes,
Sharon
please.
actually
Yes, please.
mentioned? There are so many things that have been put in place. She mentioned African free trade on the continent, and there's also East African Community. There's COMESA. I mean, one day I remember saying that in a meeting, like, oh, you can do ABCD and be able to export duty free. And people were just shocked, like, how come you don't know? And it's not like somebody brought me the information. I was just present when it was there, and I did a little bit more research.
All right.
And so when I say I blame young people, is that even it doesn't mean that we can't have everything at once. What I'm saying is that what's available, what have you done with it, so that we can also turn to the government and say, hey, we have exhausted all the resources. Now we need more to even scale to, I don't know, bigger opportunities.
All right. Kim, when it comes to systems, I mean, we are always talking about young people tapping into the agriculture sector, entrepreneurship, education, different sectors, business, trade, as she was talking about. But are our systems favorable for them to embrace this and tap into it?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question because, of course, you mentioned systems determine how things process, right? Yeah. So coming back again, every country has its system based on its context.
All right.
It's a fact, right? But these systems can be improved. And speaking of agriculture, you have crops. Every country has its own opportunity out there. It has its own the crop that is common, and it can increase potential in that area. So, and like frankly speaking, if I can go direct to crops or agriculture, like diversification is key in crop, or integrated farming is key. And when you do systems of like looking at economics policy, you're not addressing trying to address only specific agriculture, but you're looking at e-commerce as well, how you can sell product. You're looking at integrated farming, meaning that you have people of various skill sets in one sector, which is agriculture.
Right.
And in that process, you employ people across all sectors, across all fields. And this is why Commonwealth Youth Council, try to diversify, picking out potential from various backgrounds. That is key, because when you do that, you involve everyone. It's inclusivity, partnership, again, stakeholders. Everyone has a role to play in addressing those issues.
All right, Kevin, I would like us to talk about this, but bringing out facts that are actually at hand. One of the issues that are actually affecting the African continent and sometimes beyond is the issue of immigration. Having our young people growing up actually in their mind thinking about the West being their dreamland, their promised land, that if I ever happen to go to, let's say, US, Canada, I won't come back. And it's actually something someone grow up from the age of 4 thinking and actually really wanting. And, you know, at the end of the day, you find that even when growing up as Africans or even beyond, we don't have this mindset of working towards developing our communities, our countries, but going beyond. Is it because they have better opportunities, or is it because they are not being given opportunities at home? What's your take on this?
I think the reason why young people want to go abroad, that's what just my opinion is, because there is so much information that was put out by these countries that they have better opportunities for them, for their people, and so it looks good. And I think locally we have really tried. There are times when you would Google Rwanda and just there's nothing to see. And today when you Google Rwanda, it's easy. You see only positive information. You see, I mean, exporting coffee. You see technology that has emerged for the past 10 years. You see made in Rwanda, which is thriving today. And so the idea that there are more opportunities out there is simply not true, because Rwanda has really created a safe environment. It's something that you cannot take for granted, because it actually allows us to function in a system that doesn't require you to pay corruption. It doesn't require you to open a business for the next 30 days. You open a business in within 6 hours. It's done 24 hours. You own a business. You're able to operate your business, and you're given full information on how to do it actually, and you're given guidance. And recently, I think there are even more incentives that have been introduced by the government of Rwanda in terms of taxes when you're starting a company. I remember us fighting about it a few years back. But what makes me happy is that it actually works. Things change. You look at it, you're like, I was complaining about that yesterday, and now it has actually changed. That means there's a collective of people who are actually changing things directly and indirectly, including young people who have started businesses today, and the policymakers. And going back to the partnership is that these young people, instead of going outside, how about we see ourselves as partners of the government? How about we see ourselves as partners of the policymakers, so that we can actually come together and be able to criticize, demand a seat at the table, actually, because it's very possible to demand that. And as you have maybe seen, we have had youth forums with the president, leadership forums. We have been invited in so many conversations with the leaders of the country to be able to express ourselves. So I wouldn't give it away for anything, for any other country. What we have here, the safety, the environment, the leadership that actually works, the system that actually works, that doesn't require you to pay a bribe to not exist in your space. It's amazing what we have here. So I would actually ask everybody to come back now, instead of waiting and come back when you're older, when you can't do much. So it's the right time to be here today.
Sharnice, what's blinding young people from seeing all these opportunities that you and Kevin plus Kim are talking about? What's really blinding young people from tapping into these opportunities and actually making use of them?
Firstly, I think it's important to state that as young people, we need to know that because of our demographic dividend, Africa is a youthful continent, as is the case in a lot of African countries, that you've got populations that are extremely youthful, that there's an urgent need for us young people to become involved beyond what we are currently doing, because really the growth of the continent and the world will rest on its young people.
What's stopping us from getting involved in the first place, so that we can actually start there?
I believe that it's really based on a paradigm shift in how we understand what participation means. As young people, when they hear participation, we immediately think it's political participation. And not all the young people want to be in politics, right? Not every young person wants to be a politician. But participation extends beyond civic and political participation. You've got climate activists as young people that are really doing amazing work in the climate space. You've got young entrepreneurs like my sister here that's championing the cause of economic empowerment for young people. So there's an urgent need for us to have a change in our mind. That's why I'm saying it must be a paradigm shift in our understanding of what participation means. And only when we do that, for instance, in the year 2030, the African continent will have 400 million young people. So we need to understand that our demographic as a young people is extremely valuable in the current context. So, and that is why it's urgent for governments, especially governments in the Commonwealth, to understand that when you invest in young people, you shouldn't consider it as an ordinary expense. It's really an investment that's going to yield returns, and those returns are going to manifest when we speak about 2030, 2063, because it's us here in front that is going to be the ones that's going to carry on the legacy of the leaders that are currently preparing the ground for us to carry on that legacy of ensuring that our countries are economically competitive, that we are global citizens, but above all that we still have that African spirit and understand who we are as young Africans.
All right. When we talk about all this, actually, leadership, of course, comes on top of this, and that's what I'll come back shortly talking about with Kim. What actually needs to be the role of leadership, and have they really failed us? Stay with us. We'll take this short break, and we'll be right back.
Ikaze mu gihugu cy'amahirwe.
We believe in business opportunities. We hold investors in high regard.
Tunaamini katika ushirikiano wa kibiashara. Tunawathamini na kuwaheshimu sana wawekezaji. Korohereza ishoramari twabigize intego.
Les investisseurs sont nos partenaires et nous leur avons prévu plusieurs facilités.
To ease doing business is our priority.
Kuwarahisishia wawekezaji na wafanyabiashara ndio kipaumbele chetu.
Bienvenue au pays des mille collines et des mille et une opportunités.
Karibu Rwanda, taifa la maelfu ya milima, tabasamu na ukarimu wa wananchi na mamilioni ya fursa.
Welcome to Rwanda.
Ikaze mu gihugu cy'amahirwe.
Welcome back, and many thanks for keeping us company, remembering that you can actually take part into this conversation by tapping into our social media platforms, and let us know what you think and what you actually feel about this particular topic of challenges versus opportunities for the youth in the Commonwealth of Nations. Kim, have our leaders failed us when it comes to giving us platforms and actually opportunities to tap into as young people?
Firstly, on that question, let me maybe say that the issue here is not a failure, but the issue of what is the issue. And if I can say, the TOGAM, or the Commonwealth Youth Forum, which we are here today was the first day. And it is very interesting because it's the platform that brings young people across 54 countries all together in one room. You don't have that opportunity given to discuss these ideas. And your previous question on systems, this is the process it takes towards advising those systems. So if I can say that it is a great opportunity for young people to come and have those shared ideas, as my colleagues, fellow panelists were saying, because in those discussions, they share ideas, they share creativity, innovation. There are people, young people, investors, creative mindsets to these problems. So it's, and also what they want to say to government decision makers, and also that collectiveness, the unity in the diversity. So you have a lot of room, energy, the potential, the skill sets today in the same room. So you can feel that energy of skills and potential in there. And at the same time, they collectively discuss solutions. They present the problems and they discuss the solutions, what needs to be taken, and by who. Again, it's taking responsibility. So your question on leadership, it's responsibility. And today the Minister for Youth really shared a very inspirational story. A young man walking on the street of age of 8, he fixed the road because the pipe was leaking out of the water was leaking out of the pipe. That's responsibility, that's leadership, to a young kid of 8 years old. That's leadership and taking responsibility. So everyone has a role to play. And this youth forum, it's a great initiative. It's a great platform, bringing young people across all Commonwealth countries, all partners in the same room, at the same time to discuss these solutions, and it leads towards a process. Then everything takes process. You know, challenges are inevitable. That's for sure. But it takes process to address those challenges.
All right.
And with Commonwealth Youth Council, that platform with the young people, the young energy, it brings them together. And talking about CHOGM, the theme of the theme of the forum is taking charge of our future. Again, the theme is very clear and direct to every individual. Like I own it. I take ownership over the team. I will go back to my home. How do I take charge of my future, and to what direction?
All right.
You know, is it? And we want it positive. That's why young people are here discussing, representing their countries, representing their villages and families. Most important, how they can represent that. Of course, the marginalized people, they need to be inclusive in their representation, to be part of the community.
All right.
And that leads to, once they're informed, once everything is discussed with clarity, what we want, how we see in the future, that gives us the directive that we can inform the decision makers, policy makers, the investors, the stakeholders to, you know, participate in this process.
All right.
Here is what young people want. This is what they can offer. This is what they can do with the skills and potential they have and the resources. And this is where you can tap in. And that is where intergenerational dialogue comes in. Because one thing is for sure, not only issues, it's not youth issues, because in the community are youths, young people there, old people are there, women and children, and marginalized groups are in there. So this process takes, everyone needs to participate. Decision makers must have we have to all have a wide lens, and even media as well. We play that role, holding us accountable to what we can do collectively.
All right. Talking about this inclusivity that he was just talking about, for example, there's someone in a certain village, let it be here in Rwanda or even another country, that doesn't even know that there's a platform like this, the Commonwealth Youth Forum, that is ongoing, and actually even other platforms that bring on opportunities that they can tap into. How do you see this issue of inclusivity?
Again, I think it was the beginning of my conversation with you about young people seeking for information, not necessarily sitting down and waiting for someone to come and hand them the bread and give them everything. And so even from the rural areas, there are radios, there's so much more information. I remember, I'm going to give you an example of what we do at Uzuri. For those who don't know, we produce eco-friendly footwear by recycling used car tires to make beautiful and durable products. And we actually add an element of training young people in shoemaking and practical skills and soft skills. And what we do is we call people on the radio. We don't ask you if you're from Kigali in the city or if you're a certain person. What we ask is your need. You actually, do you really want to learn something that could potentially create a job for yourself? And so the information needs to be young people need to start seeking information way more than they have been, and actually being able to approach not only the government, anyone who's really in the space and operating in a way that is really taking us forward, approach them, talk to them, ask them questions in different ways, and be able to, let's say if it's in the sector, on the sector level, or let's say the village level, just go to your Umudugu, to the village person, and ask them, the village chief, ask them what's going on with CHOGM. I don't think he or she will not be able to respond to you, and she's actually obliged to give you information, because now you're taking responsibility, you're taking action on your side, and so she has no choice but to respond to you and to give you information that you need so that you can utilize this to build, if it's a business, whether it's informal or formal, find a way to actually get there and get to that person who is has been informed, because there's always somebody who is informed. It's up to you to really find that person.
All right. I'll come back to you, Sharnice. We are talking about youth tapping into opportunities, and yes, I agree with all of you that opportunities are really at hand, and young people really need to tap into those opportunities. But I have an issue. We can still see young people all over even those who we can say are really informed and are really educated with degrees, but still participating into issues like political instability, be it here in the region. We have vivid examples, or even beyond. Why? Why do we still see this? And is it because the youth really don't understand the roads to drive, or the responsibility they really have? Why do we still see this in your own perspective?
So the unrest that you are referring to comes with frustration that young people have, because the change that they envision or that they seek to see materialize perhaps is not happening at the pace that it should. So that really then stems from frustration, you know, the way young people become frustrated. And we see this not only perhaps in the region. You see young people organizing themselves on social media, having conversation around how do we cancel a certain individual or institution, because we don't see a level of accountability or understanding the urgency in implementation. And that really then throws back the ball to institutions or spaces that are charged with implementation, like you've mentioned before. And that really then goes back to the conversation of we need to be honest about, is our implementation working? If not, how do we then ensure that our implementation speaks to the aspirations of the youth on the continent and beyond? Because the changes that young people are going through goes with how the world is changing. We've got the fourth industrial revolution that the young people are a part of. The young people are literally engaged in the digital revolution, and that is why we live online, for instance. The young people back then were offline. So really, that really also challenged implementers to be able to keep up with how the world is changing. For instance, we don't need to gather in the form of workshops anymore. Talk to us online.
But Sharnice, talking about the frustration that young people have, where's the cause? Themselves or governments? And you know, who is the cause? Where's the cause? Where's the source of this frustration you're talking about?
I think the frustration is from the fact that we also have limited resources. And we must be cognizant about that. And that is why, especially for us in government that are working as actors in development, we need to also be very cognizant about the fact that we need to be sustainable in the work that we do, in our programming. But also we need to diversify our streams of income. For instance, in the case of Namibia, the National Youth Council receives funding from the state, but from that funding, we can only serve an X amount of young people. That is a matter of fact. Whereas there's so many young people in the country. So of course they would want to question the work of the National Youth Council because we cannot service all the young people at the same time. And that really is a matter of us moving into this new faculty of thought, to say, as institutions that are charged with implementation, that are empowered with resources. We need to be very realistic in understanding that it's time for us to become sustainable as institutions through diversification of our streams of income, so that we are able to expand on the quantity of young people we are able to reach and positively impact or empower. So for me, it's not really to say what is the cause of it. I always believe that it must then rather be a challenge for us, again, like I said, to work smarter.
So it's a process.
Our ways. I would want to argue that it's a process and not necessarily pinpoint to say it's governments who are underserving or are failing in their social contracts to people, because there's so many factors that influence poverty. Poverty is multidimensional. It's not only, you cannot solely say we live in poverty because of education. It's multidimensional. So our response, therefore, must also address those external shocks that influence, the category that young people fall in, whether they are impoverished or they are disempowered.
All right. Kim, do you think the youth, particularly, I'll speak on the African continent, have learned enough lessons from our history? We always say here in Rwanda that you can't know where you are going without knowing where you are actually coming from. Have we really learned enough lessons from the past?
Thank you. Firstly, I'm from the Pacific. We have our culture, we have our history. And that's a very interesting question you put, history. Knowing your history your background gives you, acknowledging your history and your background gives you, or helps you pave the way forward to a brighter future, a better future. And you know, nothing changes overnight. That's a reality. Things take time. It takes time to adopt to changes. What's innovation? You know, some years ago in the 80s, there's no internet, and then we have 90s internet. Even today, there is IT and technology, and we are trying to teach our parents what's IT, you know, whatever it's social media or what they're trying to connect with in the Zoom. And coming back, as I've mentioned, change takes over time. So for our history in the African, you know, I don't claim to know much of African region, but I can say that yes.
Yeah, talking
people,
about the youth in general.
Youth in general, they're making effort because when they see the challenge ahead, or when they are faced with obstacle, that's when it triggers you internally to look back. What is this? What is happening over time? You know, and it gives you a consciousness, you know, to change the kind of, or to frame the way of thinking. Only when you acknowledge your background, not to persuade to go to the negative, but to acknowledge who you are, your origin, and what are the challenges that you have overcome. You know, the positive things that you have done in your life, simple things that you have done in your history can be the yesterday, it's past. But what have you done to progress, both good and the other side?
All right.
That's a very important thing to always remember as African youths, even youths across the country, across the world, because your issues, your challenges of this continent is not the same as Pacific, right? We are a marine, ocean continent. Here we are a big landmass here. So we must always, as young people, there must always be this kind of mindset. My challenge, the challenges that I go through is not the same as the other. Of course, there are some cross-cutting ones, but when it comes to context and history, we have to learn from this history and not to repeat these things, because only when we learn, when we acknowledge and we want to see the positive future, then we can participate in good process, the systems that can help us adopt to a better future, an inclusive one, and a better one.
All right. Thank you very much. Kevin, what can you say about this? Because the reason I asked this question, actually, we can still see signs of some things that happened 28 years ago being happening, or there's signs of those things happening in other countries, actually even in the region. This is why I asked, have we, the youth, learned enough lessons from the past?
A very hard question to answer, because I would say that it's very personal and individual. Someone can just answer it individually. On my end, I feel like we have learned so much, especially the Rwandan youth has learned so much for the past 28 years. What our parents went through, what we all went through was horrific, that we cannot repeat that again. And so that's why we must come together and continue to work hard, work smart, to make sure that we build not only become also financially free, so that we can solve our own problems. When it comes to finances, actually, young people tend to be like, I don't know if I can really make that. It's for, you know, the businessmen, the big businessmen, but we can also create businesses that really generates tangible incomes and also create employment for ourselves. When I started Uzuri, it was really about creating employment for me, but then I realized, oh my God,
You're creating
60% of the total unemployment rate in Africa is made of the youth, and women are more likely to be affected by this issue. And so we decided to actually be part of the problem solvers and start thinking, okay, if I get a job, I need to take someone else as well with me, because if I have the opportunity to be at university, can you imagine someone else who didn't? Then it's going to be even harder for them to find a job.
All right.
So really, we have learned so much, and there's a huge road to go through again, but we need to start thinking, how can we, because we've built a wonderful place, we have done so much, but how can we also sustain it at the same time as we also pull up other people who are still behind a little bit? All
right, I'll ask you both all to be so brief on this one as we are heading towards the conclusion of this particular episode. Sharnice, do you think we are really on the right track? And generally, as we conclude, what do you think needs to be done to actually help the youth embrace their future?
I think we're on the right track. I think young people, we need to remain optimistic about the future. We need to remain inspired because we've got visionary leaders that are leading our countries, not only in the Commonwealth, but on the continent as well. They have defined visions for us. And as young people, we need to realize that those visions can only be materialized, can only be realized if we carry and make life and meaning out of those visions. So as young people, despite the challenges that we are confronted with, we have so many other good things that we should celebrate, right? And that is, one of it is that we're not occupied by foreign occupation anymore. We have self-determination, we have sovereignty as states on the continent. In the Commonwealth, we've got shared values. And above and beyond, our leaders have realized that prosperity can only be meaningful and can have real impact if it's a prosperity that is shared. And on that basis, I truly believe that as young people, we need to look forward to the future because we are going to be a part of that future. And we can only make a success of that future by getting involved now. So I'm really excited about the future of us as young people in the Commonwealth and on the continent.
All right, thank you very much. Kim, what's your last remark as we end this, and commenting on what she just said, are you also agreeing to the fact that we are on the right track?
Yes, we remain positive. Crisis is good. We just came out of COVID-19. It teaches us so much lessons. It teaches us resilience. It teaches us, being strong and courageous to take bold actions and adapt to those crises. Crisis is good in the sense that it teaches us that we can progress despite what is happening. And at the same time, we look forward. We have a vision, as you mentioned, and those things, the Youth Forum team, I keep referring, taking charge of our future. It requires responsibility. It requires character, the values and the visions that are necessary. It requires partnership, inclusiveness, and at the center of it, as young people, there are different groups, age groups. Intergenerational dialogue is key to this. Only when we understand each other, shared wisdom from the older generation is necessary. And at the same time, we must, as young people, we must learn from the older generation.
All right.
Their life experience is a wisdom for us. You don't need to repeat those mistakes.
All right.
Yeah. So, take time. Change take time. And come out. Every young person, as mentioned earlier, has a potential to create change. But what is the change leading towards? And that needs to be directed towards a positive change in the community. And I have to conclude this by saying that your village, your family, your country needs you more. You need to be that change in your community and your country. And taking charge of your future, it also affects the community and the family you live in. She's an entrepreneur, social activist. It affects every people around.
All right.
And taking charge of that future requires all this responsibility and all these things.
Thank you very much. Kevin, 10 seconds. What's your challenge to young people?
I think they answered everything, but the challenge, the challenge to young people is to actually start now, really, start now.
All right. I can't really thank you all. Thank you, Kevin, for being on the show.
So much, Sam.
Thank you very much, Taranis.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Kim.
That's right, and thank you so much for
And thank you all for being with us on this particular episode. And more is actually on the way. Stay tuned to Rwanda Television and all our platforms. Up until next time, my name stays Sam Kalisa. Goodbye.